Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Amy Stewart, who is a Canadian thriller author. And Amy, for readers unfamiliar with your work, could you please describe what exactly it is that you write?
Yes, of course. So I write thrillers, like you said. My first my first three thrillers were a linked series. The titles were Still Mine, Still Water, and Still Here, so they could be read independently, but it was the same characters that carried through. And my fourth novel, which released in March 2023, is titled A Death at the Party, and it's a standalone thriller. It's a book of its own, and it follows. Here it is. It follows Nadine Walsh over the course of a single day as she plans a party, except there's a murder in the mix.
Hmm, sounds very interesting. I wouldn't want to hold a party with a murder. Okay. So, what do you think what draws readers to these kinds of books?
I think that I've been thinking about that question a lot lately. Why we're so interested in reading thrillers or, listening to podcasts related to true crime or murder. And I think it's because we're always, as humans, we're always working through things in our own minds. We're always worried about things. And these days, especially the world around us can feel pretty complicated and sometimes dark. And I think that thrillers are a good way. I certainly feel as a writer that thrillers are a good way for me to process those feelings, sort of answer those what if questions that might nag at us or keep us up at night. And for readers, it's almost the same thing. Like it's just a way for you to dive in where there's a scenario where that what if question sort of plays out in not real life but on the page, and I think it's like it's almost weirdly an escape. Like reading about these things is an escape from our worries about them in real life. That's how I feel, because I find thrillers to be such an escape, even though they're addressing the things I'm actually worried about.
Hmm. Okay. So, what was the inspiration for Death at the Party?
So, A Death at the Party, like I said, takes place over the course of a single day. So, the inspiration is like I not even inspiration. I actually stole the entire premise from Mrs. Dalloway, which is the 1925 classic novel by Virginia Woolf. And that novel follows the narrator, Clarissa Dalloway, as she plans a party and goes through the course of her day, picking flowers, getting the food organized, and thinking about her past and sort of churning through memories and things, maybe regrets and choices she's made. So I took that exact same premise, but threw in a murder. So the way that the book is set up is the first chapter is takes place at the end of the day, at the end of the party, and it's that Nadine is standing over a dead body in her basement. So you find that out in the first two paragraphs. And then we go back to the beginning of the day, where she's having tea in her kitchen, sort of happy, not happy, but, ready to plan a party. And so only the reader knows that she will end up at the end of the day standing over a dead body. So I think of it as a not a who done it, because we know right away who done it. It's like a why done it. Why did she kill someone at her party, and who does she kill? So the inspiration very, very plainly was Mrs. Dalloway. And then I sort of, the idea of that P.D. James used to, she took Death Comes to Pemberley. She took Jane Austen and turned it into a murder mystery. I loved that idea. Like take a classic novel and turn it into a thriller.
Aha. Okay. So what kind of research did you have to do for this? I know you were mentioning all these different books. So you read all of these different books and then just put them together?
So I've read Mrs. Dalloway a couple of times, and I've definitely reread it in the process of researching and getting ready to write this book. This book didn't actually require a ton of research because I'm not the aspects of the book. It's a woman. She's younger than me, but she's around my age. She has kids. I have kids, teenagers. She has teenagers. You know, she's throwing a party. So there was nothing sort of way out there. It's not like I was researching like the bottom of the ocean or space or something like that, where I really had to um, dig deep. I had to do that in previous books. In my first book, I had that it was a mining town, a coal mining town. So I had to research the workings of a mine because that factored into the story. So, but for this book, the research was more reading about rereading Mrs. Dalloway, and then just trying to get into the head of my narrator, which really was just, I think COVID, honestly, the pandemic almost did that research for me, because a lot of this book is about worrying about people you love. And I think we all did our fair share of that during COVID.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, do you have a favorite research story from any of your books?
You know what? I think that in my first book, as I said, Still Mine, I have it here, right here. Here it is. So
Mhm.
Still Mine takes place in a town called Blackmore, where there's a mine that had an accident about 10 years before the story, and the mine was shuttered, so closed down, which in a town, we know in towns that are reliant on a mine, if the mine shuts down, the town is essentially decimated. Um, so I had to research mining and aspects of mining. And at one point, I contacted a mining engineer and said, "Oh, I have all these questions about, an egress, which is like the different exits that they have from mines. So if you have a mine in a mountain, you have to have more than one way out." And so I'm researching all of this, and how would people stay underground, and how would you breathe, and asking him all these questions. And finally, he said, "Listen, you don't need me to believe your story. You need the average reader. You just need the average reader to believe your story." So that's been actually what he said. There has been a real guiding force for me in every other book, where you want the information about something that you may not know about, like say the ocean or space, to be accurate, but you don't have to go into so much detail that a mining engineer is going to read it and say, "Well, that is accurate. The egress has to be at a 45-degree angle." Like, nobody needs that. So it needs the believability threshold, which in thrillers, as writers, we're thinking about that all the time, right? Like, because readers will give you a long leash in terms of believability. Like, you can invent some pretty wild scenarios, and readers will be like, "Okay, here we go." But there is a point where a reader might say, "Yeah, I'm not buying this anymore." So you have to find that sweet spot where the average reader is with you and will believe you, but the expert might be like, and you can be okay with that. So he really guided me in my research from moving forward. Just make it so that the average reader is with you.
That's an interesting point. I think, yeah, it works with a lot of the genres. I think some of the scientific genres may be a little bit harder to do that with,
Yeah,
like science fiction.
absolutely.
But
Absolutely. And an interesting story in Death at the Party is that one of the characters is diabetic. One of Nadine's sons, her son is diabetic. And I have a friend who's diabetic, a very good friend, and he has a certain system that he uses to inject insulin. And so that's the system that I used in the book. But then I have had 10 emails through my website from primarily nurses, who've said, "That's not how you inject insulin. That's not the standard way." So after the fourth email, I emailed my editor and said, "Listen," because the book gets reprinted, and the
Mhm.
and the ebook would get updated right away. So I said, "Listen, we have to change this, because if I'm making nurses mad, there are a lot of nurses. So I need to get this right."
True.
So and really it came down to just changing a few words. Basically, he was injecting it into his arm, and they said he wouldn't do that. or if he did, it would be the upper back of his arm. So so we just changed a sentence here and there, like a few words, but you really, readers do not like being toyed with on something that they know a lot about.
Right. It's very interesting. Aha. Okay. So, what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out A Death in the Party? At the party, rather.
I think I would say the pandemic was the biggest challenge. So I have three kids. They are now 12, 14, and 16. But, when the pandemic started, they would have been 9, 11, and 13. And so they were home. I mean, here in Canada, in Toronto specifically, schools were closed a fair bit in 2020 and even in one part of 2021. So that was really when I was working on the book. And so I really had to adjust my writing life. And ultimately, I mean, I would never say that separate from the pandemic, that effect on my writing life ultimately was pretty positive in that what it taught me is that you can't be precious about what your writing life looks like. Like, you can't say I have to be at my desk in a quiet room and it has to be daytime and I have to have music on and I have to have a warm cup of tea. And the more parameters you set or limitations you set on your writing life, the less likely you are going to be able to do it. So what the pandemic taught me is that I needed to be able to write while there was a kid 8 feet away playing the piano and another one 15 feet away trying to do his math homework, and a dog, and for a while during the pandemic, we had ducks in our house. So there was like ducks roaming around.
Ducks.
Really, it was ducks. We adopted two ducklings and brought and raised them to like adult duck size, which doesn't take very long. We had them for about 6 weeks. But um, yes, it really taught me that you have to be uh, flexible and you have to work hard to expand your capacity as a writer. So if you say I could only write in silence, then go to a coffee shop and try to write in a noisy spot. And if you say I can only write in the morning, then try to sit down one night at 9 o'clock. And even if you can only do it for 15 minutes, just give it a shot, because the more capacity you build as a writer, especially these days when there's like distraction, enough distraction to sink a boat, we need to expand in every way we can.
Hmm. So, it, in other words, you just take any time you possibly can. If you have 10 minutes here, you just sit down and write,
Mhm.
no matter where you are.
When I'm in my editing, like when I'm in the later phases of a novel where it's at the timeline tightens, like suddenly once the publisher, when you have a publisher, once you get to a certain point of editing, where they feel like it's getting pretty close to being finished, then they set a publication date. And once you have a publication date, then the deadline is like not flexible anymore. So when I'm in that, which is like, it's very intense time, I will be editing, writing, like I'm doing it whenever I can during the day. I like, if I can sneak, I put the pasta in the boiling water and then edit for 10 minutes while it's cooking. Like, I will take any opportunity. I'm not like that day to day. I don't have the stamina for that every day, but the ideal writing life for me is to spend my mornings writing and then go about the rest of my day. But if I'm on a deadline, it's all hands on deck.
Okay, so for an ideal day, in an
Mhm.
ideal situation, okay, what is your writing space like?
Well, you're in my writing space right now. So I'm sitting at my desk and I have a nice wooden desk and it's too messy for me to show you. I have too much pride. But so behind me, I'm really into just things that are familiar and that conjure memories for me. So a lot of this art, those are my kids. That's a long time ago. Actually, that's on a beach in Delaware, which, if you haven't been to Delaware, it's a surprisingly gorgeous state that I think is very, very sort of under recognized for its beauty. But and then just art. I'm moving my hand the wrong way. Art by my kids. That's a picture of my dad when he was young. A friend of mine is a gorgeous. She makes these porcelain-eyed dolls, and she made that. And um, so yeah, it's just like a collection of art and pictures, and I have a chair to edit on. And then in front of me is I have like a mood board where if I'm working on stuff. So my next book, I'll show you. I'm about to put this on my mood board. This is my next book has the ocean factors into it. So anytime I see anything about the ocean that interests me, I'll cut it out. So I just cut this out yesterday. This is a lighthouse keeper in Nova Scotia, which is on the east coast of Canada, and the lighthouse was automated on an island, a remote island, but he and his wife refused to leave. So they
Wow.
still live there. So
Fun.
I try to keep my space. I have lots of plants on this side. I try to keep my space very um cozy, and where everything I look at, there's some kind of memory or it's a source of inspiration. And then my writing day would be having an efficient and productive morning, and then having the afternoon to do all the things attached to, lots of emails and things like that, and then kids stuff. And I always say if I can think about what we're going to have for dinner before 2 o'clock, then it's a good day.
Great. So when you're actually at home writing, do you prefer music or silence? And if it's music, what type of music do you like?
I do listen to music. I would say I will download like folky playlists. I can't have, rock and roll like that. Because then I start like, I need something that's going to keep me in my seat. I had this one playlist that my husband made on Spotify. I forget what it's called, like something acoustic jams or something like that. And I listened to it while I was writing my first three books. And even though it had like 300 songs, by the time the book was finished, um, I knew every song. Like I just listened to that playlist over and over to the point where I feel like I can't do it anymore because you know how our senses, sight, smell, taste, hearing, like everything our senses can be very transporting. So I find when I listen to that playlist, I feel like I'm back in the spaces I was in when I was writing the first book. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sensitive that way. Like I really attach um, music and even smells to particular times and places. So
Mm.
maybe that's the writer in me.
So do you need to have anything to eat or drink while you're writing? And you have favorite
Well, I
foods or
always have
drinks?
water, and I love to have a cup of tea or coffee in the mornings. And in the winter, we have, pretty cold winters, so I'll always have like a nice hot cup of tea. And another thing that I'm famous for with my kids is that I don't think I have one here right now because it's summer, but I always have hot water bottles or heating pads and I have a blanket there. You can see I have blankets. Like I'm actually almost a bit of a crazy lady around cozy. Like I really love to have blankets and hot water bottles, on my back. Not even because I'm achy, just because I love to feel warm and cozy. So that's like if I have, my hot water bottle and a cup of tea, and yeah, then it's a life is good writing moment.
Okay. And you did mention that you had a dog.
I do have a
Now,
dog. She's lying right beside me.
okay. Now, does your dog help you when you're writing, or does she hinder you?
No, she helps me for sure because she's quiet. quiet generally, although now that I've said that, she's going to start barking. Um, and she's very gentle and sweet, and she's always up for a cuddle. So we got her in 2019. So I would say the first half, I would say 2015 is, I mean, I was writing before then, but when my professional career really started was around 2015. So my first half, no dog. And I think that, she doesn't care about what I'm writing about. She's not interested. She can't read. So she's not
Oh,
invested. So she's happy to cuddle with me, whether I've had a good writing day or a bad writing day. And I think the biggest thing is that she gets me um, out. I mean, I have to walk her. So sometimes when you get stuck, you can get really discouraged, and a walk is a great way to clear your head. But um, it's harder for me just on my own to motivate myself to do that. But if she's, basically standing there looking very cute, wanting a walk, and I always feel so much better after a walk. So she is a wonderful addition, to the point where I put her in the acknowledgments of my book. I mean, if it what I would even dedicate a book to her if it wasn't extremely weird to do so. Maybe it's not that weird, but
no, I wouldn't think so.
I think some
I
of
think
my
it'd be,
friends might say, "Wait a minute, you dedicated to your dog before me?" Not sure how I feel about that.
well, I think dogs are sometimes even closer than
They're
people.
pretty vital. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Okay, now getting back to a death at the party. Um, was there any
Yes.
character in there that you loved the most or hated the most?
Um, I That's a tough question. In this book, there's a character, Nadine's mom. Her name is Marilyn Millay. So that's not her real last name; it's a pen name, named after the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay. So um, Nadine's mom, Marilyn, is a famous writer. And when I say famous, I mean like Stephen King, like Danielle Steele has sold hundreds of millions of books, would be recognized walking down the street, that kind of famous. And even though she's famous like that, she raised Nadine. They were very poor for a long time until her first book became a hit. So she lives like she's still, the money could go at any time. And I just had so much fun writing her because she's very clever and very funny and has a great relationship with Nadine. She's pivotal to the story. But I think even though, some of her decisions in her life maybe weren't great, um, I think she's one of those characters where even if you say, wow, like that's, I can't believe she did that, or you would never, she does not lose the reader's empathy. Like she really is hard to dislike. I feel that way. And I can gauge it because I feel it when I'm writing them. I know whether they're likable or not. Um, so with Marilyn, I just felt that she was so fun to write. She's really great. And then there is another character in the book named Julian Simone. He's a reporter, and I really with him got to lean into a jerk. Like he's just a jerk, and he's not even really trying to hide it, right? Like he's not trying to hide the fact that he's a jerk. He's just being a jerk. And that's because sometimes in thrillers it's all about people are trying to hide, they might be evil, but they're trying to like behave like they're not evil. And so um he's just a jerk. So he was also fun to write.
I can imagine writing jerks would be fun to
Yes,
do.
because
Yeah.
there are a lot of jerks in the world, right? There are. So it's
And if
fun.
you're
It's fun to
and if you're not a jerk, it's kind of fun to get into a character and kind of, because when you're writing, sometimes you get into the characters and you can be a jerk when you're writing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, one of the biggest, um, I think, central themes in all of my books is that people will do terrible things, but most crime isn't committed by people who think they're evil and would say, "Well, I'm an evil person," or by someone who's a serial killer or something like that. Most crime is committed by people who feel justified in what they're doing, and whether it's they're stealing because they need something, or they're avenging, or they're protecting something, or whatever it is. Most people who commit crimes on some level feel justified, or they would say that they were desperate, or they snapped in some way, or something happened. So I really think that the interesting part of thrillers is that idea that any one of us, you or me, any one of us, if put in the right circumstances that were dangerous enough, or we were afraid enough, or there was someone that we loved who we felt this desperate need to protect, we could do we could do terrible, terrible things. In protect others, like so. Um, yeah. So I believe that, and so I think most jerks don't think they're jerks,
That's true.
but he
Yeah.
but he's a jerk, and I enjoyed writing him.
Okay. Sounds good. Now, do you put yourself in your books sometimes, or bits of yourself?
I would say bits. I don't put myself in my books, but I do think, especially in this one. So Nadine is a mom. She has two teenagers. I have two teens and a tween. She's married. I'm married. So you do steal little sort of interactive elements from your life, maybe, but I don't. I think sometimes what I'll do is take some aspect of my life, like, worrying about your kids, which we all do, and then taking it like really to the nth degree. So, because otherwise it wouldn't be a thriller. I worry about my kids if they go for a bike ride. There's no thriller in that. So you have to kind of take it to the nth degree. So I do think I have aspects, and in this book, I think the mother-daughter relationship. I have I have obviously a mom, and then she lives close by, and then I have two sisters. So the woman to woman family dynamic, I think, is like a gold mine for a thriller. And I'm very lucky. My relationship with my mom is excellent, and same with my sisters. But I just think that in the intensity of it, and how you can feel so um like those their opinions matter so much to you, and you're so intertwined, and it's very intense emotionally. So I think I did pull from that a little bit. The character's name, the mother character, is Marilyn, and that's my mom's name, but I do feel like it's an homage to my mom, and I think she would feel the same way because she is a great character.
That's another question, is how do you come up with the names for your characters?
um, there she goes again. Lots of different ways. So my kids all play ice hockey. And so the ice hockey, they have lots of teammates, and their teammates have parents. So often what I'll do is a parent will say to me, will you name a character after me? And I'll say, sure. And so I never take a full name. I would take one parent's first name and put it with one parent's last name. So I mix and match, but I over the years with the books, I've hit a lot of different parents. And then the other thing that I do is, my parents live about 5 minutes away, and they live next to a cemetery, and we will often go. It's a very beautiful old cemetery, and we will often walk through it because it's a peaceful walk, and sometimes you can see deer in there, and coyotes, which is less less charming. Um, but my kids think I'm such a weirdo because sometimes I'll like take my phone and be like, take a picture of a gravestone and like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, that's a good character name. So grave cemeteries,
Interesting.
gravestones are a treasure trove of
Interesting.
names. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, think about it. All it is like rocks with names on them. So if you're looking for and you really see the richness of naming, especially generations ago. Like just the there's a lot of really beautiful names. So that's always been a way if I need inspiration, go to the cemetery.
Wow. That's very interesting. Okay. So what can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, I hinted with my little
Hmm.
lighthouse keeper. I'm in the early stages of working on my next book, which is a thriller. But A Death at the Party was very contained. It was a single day, single neighborhood, single family, one narrator, first person. And this book is more, I see it as like an adventure, like an almost around the world adventure, the ocean and boats and that kind of thing. So I can't really be more specific than that because
Hmm.
it's still pretty nebulous in my brain. But I always try to have some fun element that whether in this case it was the Mrs. Dalloway riffing off of a classic, and for the next book it's going to be the element of adventure, maybe even a little romance.
Hmm. So are you a pantser or an outliner?
I am a I am a pantser. I will say the analogy that I always use is, let's say um, you're going on a road trip. So you have I if I could compare my writing to going on a road trip, let's say I pick Seattle. And so for me, Seattle, for most people, for everybody, because it's on the ocean, Seattle is west of us. So I would say, okay, I know I'm going to go to Seattle. And then I would get in my car and I would point the car west and I would just drive and have a compass and say, okay, as long as you're mostly going west, eventually you're going to hit the ocean. And then you can say, which way is Seattle, north or south? And that's um, generally how I operate. So I know my destination, which means I understand what the ending of the story is going to be. And then from there, I um, I just point the car and go. I don't have any map because if I do, the times where I have done that and have had a map, I just deviate from it anyway. So why bother?
Good idea. Very good idea. Okay. Now I have some questions about being a writer. What is your favorite part of being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Um, I think my favorite part in the actual writing process is this early stage where you're sort of conjuring up ideas and everything feels new and fresh and then in the whole thing, 100%, my favorite thing is meeting readers, people who've read my books, and talking to them. There's actually nothing more thrilling for me as a writer than talking to someone who's read one of my books and is speaking to me about the characters of the story, even if like they have something that they weren't satisfied with or that annoyed them. Um, Speaking about to someone who cares about your story and is invested in what you did and what you wrote, that's because that's why you do it, right? You write in search of a readership, and so that it's thrilling. It's thrilling, and I know there's always talk about books, that the death of the book, and I don't believe that at all. I find as my writing career has progressed, it's only gotten richer, and the audience has only gotten bigger. Not just for me specifically, but for all books.
Hmm. Okay. So, what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process, and how do you overcome that?
To me, the most challenging part is the middle stage where you have a lot of the story. You know, you're halfway through your road trip and you are not at your destination. You don't know how long it's going to take you to get there, but it's too late to turn back. That's the hard part for me. The sort of what I think in writer speak you call it the muddle in the middle,
Mm,
where you know you're sort of in that middle part, and it's just you know the fun part's over, and now and I mean it's always fun and it's always a privilege, but where you get it just gets it can feel difficult and you have a lot of decisions to make, and even just the middle part of the book is kind of the hardest to write because you've got this beginning and you know how it's going to end, and then you have to sort of link it all together. So that to me is the most challenging part.
okay. And what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
My favorite adventure is going places. So I've had the opportunity a few times to go um, travel to places. Vancouver. I went to Vancouver and Seattle. I'm going again to Vancouver. I'm actually going today to later today to Kingston, Ontario, which is about 3 hours away, to do an event there, and it just feels like a wonderful adventure to get to travel. You know, to meet readers. What's better than that?
That is great. So, what is the greatest lesson you've learned thus far in your writing career?
I think I can circle back to one of my earlier answers and say that the biggest lesson that I've learned in my writing career is to not be precious about the who, where, when, why, how of writing. Right, that I have to be flexible in terms of what my writing life looks like, and that if you make all kinds of excuses for why you can't write, oh, it's you know it's too late or my chair's not comfortable enough or whatever, then you're just limiting yourself, and really the only person you're limiting is yourself. So I think just expanding your capacity for writing as much as you can, the best possible thing you can do for yourself as a writer.
Okay. And do you have any other pieces of advice that you'd like to share?
I think that's really it. Like, you know, there's the standard, you know, obviously, as I've said now twice, don't be precious about what your writing life looks like, but also don't be precious about the words themselves. I mean, any writer will tell you that the first draft, sometimes I've had chapters, I have a chapter in A Death at the Party, one chapter that comes near the end, so I won't tell you what it's about, where it spilled out of me like fully formed. And the draft that's in the book, the version of the chapter that's in the book is almost identical to the one that I wrote like in one morning. And so that's wonderful. Great when that happens, but that is so rare. Most of the time, you write something that's pretty garbage, and then you slowly work it out and take the sort of repetitive words or lines out and fix the dialogue. So I think it's also really important not to be precious about what you write, and to understand that over time you're going to draft and redraft and fix things, and then when you're ready to share it with people, and don't be precious, you know, if they give you feedback. My rule of thumb for readership for editing is if you have, let's say you give your book to three people to read, if one of them says, I don't like this character, then you might argue with that person and say, well, here's why they're in the book. But if all three readers tell you the same thing, I don't, this didn't make sense, or I don't like this, or this chapter felt too long, or I didn't, then you need to be careful about ignoring their feedback. Like I said with the nurses
Mm.
with the diabetes, like you can't, if you're getting 10 emails, it's time to listen to the nurses. So you do have to respect your readers as much as possible.
Right. So, are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you would recommend to other writers that may have helped you with your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the beginning, libraries and actually bookstores and libraries are often like a really great local sources of community for writers. Bookstores, a big part in the publishing sense, a big part of writing is networking and knowing people and understanding how the industry works and attending readings, watching videos like this, staying connected to your local bookstore, understanding, what books are making the bestseller list, and just having your finger on that pulse. And independent bookstores and libraries are such a great way to access that. A lot of libraries will offer writing groups. And if they don't, and you have a great local library, you could ask them and they might pull something together for you. But the first writing class I ever took was at a local library. And, it was just a group of us met once a week and it changed my life. And even community colleges, like just seeking out community in whatever form. And the best place to start 100% are indie bookstores and libraries.
Okay. Okay. Excuse me. So, now I have questions about you as a person. What is one thing that most
Mhm.
people don't realize about you?
Well, I think that maybe the most interesting thing about me outside of my writing life is that I'm a hockey coach. So I have three boys who play ice hockey, and I am the head coach of one of their teams. I coach competitive ice hockey, and it's a lot of fun, but it's a very, very interesting world. There's a thriller in there somewhere. I haven't written it yet, but I used to play ice hockey, and now I coach it.
Uh-huh. Okay. What question do you wish interviewers would ask you? And what would your answer be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I find that the interviews that I do, like this one, this has been a very thorough, great interview. I would say I don't often get asked, about the challenges of writing. And I think that that's such a great question. I mean, you did ask it, but I do think it's really important for writers to be honest about the limitations and the challenges and that it's not, we have this pretty fairy tale sort of perception of what a writing life looks like, and it's not necessarily the reality. So I think it is important in all areas of your life, whether it's parenting or marriage or work or writing or creativity or whatever it is, to be honest about the struggles as well as the victories, because we live in a very social media heavy world where things can be, people can present their lives in a very shiny way. And I believe that it's important to be honest about the harder aspects of life. So I think it's important to talk about that when you talk about your writing life.
Hmm. Okay. So what is or are your passions when you're not writing, and how do you make time for the things that to do the things that you love?
Well, like I said, I coach hockey. That's a passion. Right now, my other big passion is walking, just going for walks. And I just really try um, to really understand, like to be clear about the relationship for myself between doing those things and being a better writer. Like if I take time to go for a walk, I will be a more creative, more focused, more engaged writer when I do get to my desk. So I think it's really important to make that connection, that
Mhm.
um, taking time for the things that you care about, that you're passionate about. For me, I love reading, I love listening to audiobooks, I love listening to podcasts, I love walking, I love, spending time with my family and going out with friends. And so I just have to make time to do those things. And then, when I do sit down to write, the writing part of my brain is rested and ready to go.
That's an interesting point. You do have to take time for yourself before you can,
Yes,
before you
absolutely.
can actually write. You need to have a rested brain in order to write. That's true.
Exactly.
Okay. I only have two more questions for you. Um,
Okay.
where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And I have to do
Yes,
a plug for Annie's. You can
absolutely. I always say indie bookstores first, and yes. So, on my website, which is amystewart.ca, and my name is Stuart, and it's CA for. I have links to all my social media. Um, I'm generally most active on Instagram. And then also to how you can access the books. And the first one that I use is IndieBound, which is how you find independent bookstores. Um, but for the most part, my book is available everywhere the books are sold. And if you go to an indie bookstore and it's not there, they will order it for you. It's widely available. It's coming out in audiobook this month, I think in a couple weeks. And but the ebook is out now too, so it's pretty accessible.
That's great. And if you do want to get Amy's books, you can call Annie's at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. Okay. And
Wonderful.
you did sort of answer part of my next question is where can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Yes, so I would say the best place to go is my website, which is Amy Stewart, Amy AMYSTUART.ca. That has links to all my social media. My Instagram is Amy Stewart Writer. And yeah, I love sharing little tidbits about my writing life and pictures of my dog. So that's a great place to find me.
What kind of dog is it that you have,
She's
by
a
the way?
golden doodle. I wish I could get her. She won't come up here if I call her. She's camera shy, but she's a golden doodle. Her name's Millie.
Aha. Okay. And yes, Amy did do a written interview with us, so you can take a look at it on our Facebook page. Um, so thank you very much, Amy, and we hope someday we will get you to our store.
I would love that.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Amy Stewart.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we will be speaking to you. Bye.